Honorable Chairman NSE Shri Srinivas Injeti, distinguished leaders of India's leading companies, respected heads of asset management companies, members of the Nifty 50 family, colleagues from across the market ecosystem, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The story of modern India's capital markets can in many ways be told through the evolution of NSE and its flagship index Nifty 50, often described as the stock of the nation. This year marks an important milestone, nearly 3 decades since the launch of the Nifty 50, and it is fitting that we gather today to recognize the leaders of the companies that have shaped this journey. Today is therefore not merely the anniversary of an index, it is also a reflection of 3 decades of India's economic transformation, corporate evolution, and growing investor confidence. To appreciate the significance of the Nifty 50, it is useful to recall the context in which it emerged. In the early 90s, India's financial markets were undergoing a period of important structural reforms. With the establishment of the National Stock Exchange in 92 and the introduction of electronic trading by NSE in 1994, India's equity markets began a transition towards greater transparency, efficiency, and nationwide accessibility. As markets modernized, there emerged a clear need for a transparent, rule-based benchmark that could represent the performance of India's leading companies and serve as a reliable reference point for investors. In the beginning, we had launched NSE 100 almost within 15 days of starting NSE's equities market. And later on, in April 96, we launched Nifty 50 with a base value of 1,000 and a base date of November 395. The objective was simple yet powerful: to create an index comprising India's largest and most liquid companies that could act as a credible barometer for the country's equity markets. The pace of India's economic expansion has also been reflected in the index's trajectory. After taking over 2 decades to cross the 10,000 mark, the Nifty 50 crossed 20,000 in 23 and 25,000 in 24, reflecting the accelerated growth of India's corporate sector. Over the past 3 decades, the Nifty 50 has grown alongside India's economy. The market capitalization of Nifty 50 companies accounted for around 42% of the total listed market capitalization at the time of the launch. This share rose to nearly 65% during the global financial crisis and currently stands at around 43.6% as of February 27, 2026, indicating the continued significance of the Nifty 50 within India's listed equity universe. Over time, the index has become the foundation of India's index-based investment landscape. The Nifty 50 today accounts for nearly 50% of total assets under management linked to index strategies with an AUM of 4.7 lakh crore as of December 2025. More broadly, NSE indices together account for about 73% of all passive funds AUM in India. I recall in 1995 when we were making the Nifty, I wrote to SEBI that we are going to launch this index and we'll have derivatives on that. And that time O.P. Gehrotra, who was the director of SEBI, which is now equivalent to WTM, he called me and said, Nifty 50 is not a good name. And I said, sir, on what basis you are saying Nifty is not a good name? It means clever. And he said, no, there used to be Nifty 50 companies in America in 1960s and 70s, and then they came down. So Nifty 50 euphoria is considered bad in America. So you don't give it the name of Nifty 50. I said, but it's a 50-share index and everyone has started calling it Nifty 50. So even if we don't call it Nifty 50, and that's what happened, we started calling it NSE 50, but people called it Nifty 50. And so that's how ultimately people's voice counts. Whatever we want usually doesn't matter. And so there are many, many stories of Nifty which comes to my mind when I kind of think of this important barometer, which has now become part of our life. Now, when you are in class 10, what was Nifty? When you graduated, what was Nifty? When you got married, what was Nifty? when you had first child, what was Nifty? So Nifty is something you look at when you wake up. Nifty is something you look at when you go to sleep and probably in your dreams, right? Today especially, given the fact what has happened. So Nifty is there in all our dreams and all our waking life, and that's what it has become. And the breadth of sectors represented has also shifted markedly between April 96 and February 26, with financials emerging as the dominant sector, rising from 21.3% to 37.7%, and information technology from nil to 8.8%. In contrast, larger sectors such as materials and consumer staples saw notable moderation, reflecting the changing structure of India's equity market over time. Overall, the index has moved from being relatively materials and consumer-led in mid-90s to becoming more financials-driven and diversified, mirroring the deepening of financial markets and the rising of importance of services-oriented sectors in the economy. From an investor perspective, the journey has also been notable. Since inception, Nifty 50 Total Return Index has delivered annualized return of 12.7% in rupee terms, helping create long-term wealth for millions of investors. Over this period, the index has delivered positive returns in a large majority of calendar years, reflecting both the resilience and structural strength of India's corporate sector. But beyond returns, the importance of Nifty lies in the ecosystem it has enabled. In that sense, the Nifty 50 is not merely a market indicator, it is an institutional bridge connecting India's savers, its enterprises, and global capital. At the same time, the derivatives ecosystem linked to the Nifty 50 has expanded significantly, contributing to market liquidity, risk management, and price discovery. Of course, the journey of the Nifty 50 has not been linear. Over the past 3 decades, the index has navigated multiple business cycles and global shocks, from the dot-com collapse in early 2000 to the global financial crisis of 2008, and more recently, the disruptions associated with the COVID-19 pandemic and evolving geopolitical uncertainties. Each episode brought periods of volatility, yet each time, markets demonstrated resilience and the ability to recover, reflecting the adaptability and strength of India's corporate sector. Today, India's capital markets have expanded significantly. As of February 26, the market capitalization of companies listed on NSE now stands at 450 lakh crore, or about $5 trillion, reinforcing India's position among the 4th largest capital markets in the world. At the same time, investor participation has broadened from a couple of millions to now 12.7 crore unique investors, and one in every 4 households of India have exposure to capital markets, reflecting the increasing financialization of household savings and deeper engagement with formal financial markets. Participation today spans 99.85% of India's PIN codes. Only 28 PIN codes don't have NSE investors out of almost 19,300 plus PIN codes. Since April 2020, rising equity participation has contributed to an estimated 57 lakh crore increase in household equity wealth, highlighting the growing role of capital markets in India's financial ecosystem. Women now constitute 1/4 of all investors, reflecting the growing democratization of equity markets and their emergence as an important instrument of household wealth creation. Within this expanding ecosystem, the Nifty 50 continues to serve as an important anchor, a transparent, rule-based benchmark trusted by investors, institutions, and policymakers alike. The leaders present here today have played a central role in building and strengthening this ecosystem by creating globally competitive companies, maintaining high standards of governance, and delivering value for shareholders over a long period of time. You have contributed not only to the success of your respective organizations, but also to the credibility and depth of India's capital markets. As India moves forward on its long-term development journey, the role of strong, innovative, and well-governed companies will remain central to sustaining growth and attracting global capital. The Nifty 50 will continue to reflect that journey as a barometer of India's corporate strength and the confidence that investors place in the country's economic future. Today's felicitation, therefore, recognizes both the achievements of the past 3 decades and the leadership that will help shape the decades ahead. On behalf of the National Stock Exchange, I extend our sincere appreciation to all the leaders present here today for your contribution to India's corporate and financial ecosystem and for the role you continue to play in strengthening India's capital markets. Thank you. Jai Hind.